So anyway, that's the story. And then I just did everything I could to sort of. I couldn't become a marine biology major at that point because I was too far along. But I just started taking all the biology classes I could, and I did like an independent study on coral biomechanics, which is like, the way that coral withstand the physical environment. Like, how do they do that? So anyway, so I did a project on that, and yeah, got myself into grad school eventually.
Is there any point at which your ideas about jellyfish and what you expected to find changed?
Almost everything I looked at with jellyfish, I feel like it changed. One like big example is like I was very, very nervous, I guess, about looking into their neurobiology because I don't know anything about neurobiology, and I was scared of reading those papers. They seemed really hard to me. But then I discovered this really cool story about George Romanes, who was like friends with Darwin, and they wrote all these letters back and forth about jellyfish. That's cool. Yes. And so I loved like reading their letters, and I've had a very hard time reading On the Origin of the Species by Darwin, which is, the book where he describes what evolution is. And it's really dry and hard to read, and every sentence is like 6 sentences in it. But in these letters that Darwin was writing to George Romanes about jellyfish, I like understood why everyone loves Darwin so much, because he was really a kind and thoughtful person who was really encouraging to George and told George, like, encouraged him, but also made him work a little harder. And, I think, and what I discovered was that George actually predicted, by looking at jellyfish, he predicted the synapse, which is the connection between nerves. He predicted how synapses had to have worked by looking at jellyfish nerves. And it wasn't until about 40 years later that someone actually like named what a synapse was, but George had already like come up with it just in his work with Darwin. So yeah, every time I looked at jellyfish, I found they were way more sophisticated and way more interesting than I would have thought going into it. Yeah. Yeah.
What is the biggest misconception about you or jellyfish?
I think most people think jellyfish are just like globs of jelly out there in the world, and this kind of goes back to my answer to the last question, but jellyfish have like a very sophisticated nervous system. They have a very sophisticated sensory system. They don't have necessarily a brain, but the way they exist in the world is sort of this like distributed intelligence in a way. They're always looking in all directions, and they're always responding to their environment in this sort of distributed way, almost the way that like the internet works. They're just so well adapted to this earth and this planet that I think we need to stop thinking of them as just like balls of goo and recognize that they're extremely they'll be here after us, I think. So I think they deserve more props from everybody.
It's crazy that they don't have brains.
Yeah.
And they don't have eyes.
They do have eyes.
They do have eyes?
They have eyes. Well, they all have, they have the ability to see. The box jellies have camera eyes.
Yeah.
But all of them have eye spots and visual pigments and the ability to see light and dark and probably more than that and respond to it. And they have really sensitive touch plates that are loaded with chemical receptors and current ways to respond to the current. And they have they have a thing called a staticist, which works like in our ear, that tells it which way is up and down. The same way the little crystals on our ear move the hairs in our ears to tell us where up and down is.
I thought it was like the liquid stuff, like the ear.
In our ears? Yeah, so there's like hairs with crystals attached to them, and they're embedded. Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yes, we have semicircular canals with liquid, but we also have these hairs that have little crystals attached to the end of them, and that moves hairs. The weight of the crystal does, and then that tells our body where up and down. So we have several different ways we know where up and down is, but one of them is similar to the jellyfish. But like, what's even more amazing is like every single stinging cell has these hair cells next to it, and those hair cells are just like the hair cells in our cochlea that allow us to hear sound, and they vibrate at the same vibration as the swimming zooplankton. So they're actually like every single stinging cell is listening for the sound of a swimming zooplankton to come by. So like, they don't just have one set of ears. Like every stinging cell is armed with ears. Like it's extraordinary how sophisticated they are. Yeah.
That's
Yeah, so they don't, they're really responsive to their environment in ways that I don't think is really recognized by most people. Yeah, they're so cool.
I think people are doing like recognize jellyfish.
Yeah, I mean, I think the aquarium exhibits that, like the one that got you so fascinated, are fantastic. Jellyfish have a problem, a PR problem, because they sting, and there's no getting around that. The one jellyfish scientist told me, like, he thinks it's really cool that they sting us because it's like this very close-up interaction with something that is 500 million years old. So he sees it that way. I don't know if everybody would see it that way because it hurts. I think just having, talking about all the cool parts of jellyfish as well as their stinging parts is really important.
Like other animals hurt people.
That's right.
But jellyfish sort of get this recognition for that.
Yes.
And it's not necessarily good.
Right. And also, we tend to see animals from a human perspective. It's always like, what do we think about them? But they're just out there doing what they do. I mean, they're just living their life, And so they don't care about us very much or at all, Like they're sort of they just exist on this planet with us, and they were never meant to impress us or not impress us,
In some ways, we're invading their space.
Of course, exactly.
Like there for
Yeah. So I'm not sure. I mean, I do think the exhibits are great. Probably more nature videos about them would be cool. Scientific funding for them would be very extraordinary. Yeah.
I think you were talking about like what could an individual person also
Do.
right? Like,
Well, I think your website sounds like a fantastic idea. I feel like jellyfish are getting more notice than they used to get. There's a little more.
iconic Renaissance.
Yeah, they're
like
having
there's
a
lot
little
of-
bit of a
yeah.
moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If only you could harness that.
Yeah.
Educate people.
Well, I think your passion's pretty amazing, and keep spreading the word, the jellyfish word. Yeah, I don't know.
Speaking of jellyfish word, do they have a way of communicating?
So they must, right? Because jellyfish don't sting each other. So, and we find them in big swarms together, but they don't sting each other. So how do they know that that's a jellyfish they're touching and it's not a piece of prey that they want to eat? So they must be,
Because they're different species and they look different.
but well, they probably can't see each other so clearly. So they must have a way of communicating, of sending each other a message, probably using some sort of sugar that they give off to say, jellyfish here, don't deploy your stinging cell. Yeah, that's what they think